Hi, today we will be teaching you all about the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem takes its name from the ancient Greek mathematician Pythagoras, who was perhaps the first to offer proof of the theorem. It's very useful to know the Pythagorean theorem because you will find that as you go deeper and deeper into math, it can make your whole life a whole lot easier. You can use it in geometry, and it's also the backbone of trigonometry. You can also use it to calculate the distance between points. So it's overall just a good thing to really understand and really perfect. Well, enough talk and let's get started. So first we have to start off with a triangle, and more specifically a right triangle. You need to make sure that you always begin with a right triangle in order for this to work. Basically, the Pythagorean theorem is great because if you know two sides of a right triangle, you can always figure out the third side. And before we show you how to do that, there's one more piece of information you need to know. The longest side of a right triangle is the side opposite the right angle, which is also known as the hypotenuse. So let's practice finding the hypotenuse of some right triangles. So in this example, you can see that the right angle is right here. And if you remember, the hypotenuse is always the side opposite the right angle. So that would be this side right here. So this side is the hypotenuse of this example. Okay, in this example, you can see that the right angle is right here, meaning that the hypotenuse would have to be the opposite side, so this side right here. So this side is the hypotenuse. Okay, so now that we've practiced finding the hypotenuse a couple of times, we can move on to the actual Pythagorean theorem. So the theorem states that a squared, so this shorter side over here, plus b squared, this side over here, equals c squared. Now this is the equation you're going to be using to find the missing side. You're going to want to keep this equation in mind because it's going to pop up many times throughout your mathematical journey. Now let's put the Pythagorean theorem into practice.
Okay, so you have two joggers. They travel from point A to point B to C and back to A. So the two joggers travel east from A to B for about 8 miles. Then they travel from B to C northwest for about 10 miles. They want to know the distance from C to A going south to solve the round trip, which just forms a right triangle. What steps will you take to find the distance from C to A? Pause this video until you are ready to see your explanation. Okay, so now you're ready to watch your explanation. So, like usual, we need to begin with our equation. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. We know that c would be 10 miles and b could be 8 miles. So let's plug that in. So we don't know a squared, but we know that 8 squared is b and c squared is 10 squared. So now let's simplify. A squared plus 64 equals 100. So now we must subtract 64 from both sides. So that becomes a squared equals 36. But we're not done. That needs to be simplified too. So the square root of 36 equals what? Well, 36 squared equals 6. So that is our answer. So let's go back. The distance from C to A was unknown, but now that we've solved, as seen here, we know that it's now 6. So it is 6 miles. And that concludes your independent word problems. And continue watching this video to learn more about triples.
Since the Pythagorean theorem is represented by a squared plus b squared equals c squared, you already know that there are only two known lengths, 6 units and 8 units, which are the two legs a and b. Since we don't know the length of c or the hypotenuse, we must fill in what we already know into the equation. Since we already know that a equals 6 and b equals 8, we have to rewrite the equation and fill in the numbers to get 6 squared plus 8 squared equals c squared. Because c is still unknown, it is represented by c squared in the equation, which makes 6 squared equal 36 and 8 squared equals 64. So now it's 36 plus 64 equals c squared. The next step is simplifying what we already know. We know that 36 plus 64 equals 100, which means 100 equals c squared. C squared means finding the square root so that the square root of 100 equals c, and the square root of 100 equals 10. That means c equals 10, and we've discovered the missing length of c. In this next example, we found it helpful to write our equation at the top to remind us of our format. Okay, so this time in our new triangle, we know that one leg is 9 units, but we also know that the hypotenuse is 15 units, and the unknown side is labeled b. Again, we must rewrite the equation so it becomes 9 squared plus b squared equals 15 squared. Now you have to solve out what you already know. So 8 squared would be 81, then you rewrite plus b squared, then that would equal 225. Yeah. Now you need to get rid of the 81, so you would subtract 81 from each side. That would result in b squared equals 144. Now you need to find the square root of each side, so that would be the square root of 144. That would mean b equals 12, and you found your solution.
Okay, so let's get started with the guided practice. You are making a flag to hang in the front of your school for bullying awareness. The home economics teacher is going to help you sew it. She wants to put it in the same shape as a right triangle. You know that the shortest side is 6 inches long. The opposite side is 2 plus a inches long. However, the unknown side is c. So, you want to find out what is the length of the missing, which is c. So, you already know that 6 is the side of A, and you want to find out what B is, too. So, to solve, you want to fill in what you already know. Okay, so we already know the equation to fill in is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. We already know that 6 is A. So, we must fill in what we already know with the equation. So, since we know that 6 is A, so we must fill in 6 where A was, so it becomes 6 squared. For B, we know that it's A plus 2, so we fill in, for B, 2 plus A squared equals C squared. So the whole equation is 6 squared plus 2 plus A squared equals C squared. Then, you must add in the next step. So, we already know that 6 is A. So, since A was already in the previous equation, we know that it now becomes 6 squared plus 2 plus 6 squared equals C squared. Then, the next step means simplifying. So, it becomes 6 squared plus 8 squared equals C squared. The next step becomes solving the squares. So that means that 36 plus 64 equals C squared. That becomes 100 equals C squared. Then that means that we must find the square root of 100. So the square root of 100 is what? Well, the square root of 100 means 10 equals C. So our answer is 10 equals C. Okay, now let's go back to the original problem. Okay, so 6 was the original side. We already know that. But now that we've solved the equation, we figured out that the side 2 plus A really equals 8. and missing side C now becomes 10. So the dimensions of your flag becomes 6, 8, and 10. Okay, so now the answer becomes the side. One side we already know is 6 inches. The missing one was 8 inches, and C was 10 inches. Now we've solved our whole word problem. Okay, so on to our second word problem. You just bought a TV to hang in your living room. You want to find the actual length of the TV and compare it to the advertised length. So you should know that a TV is measured on its diagonal, like this. So if you realize that the diagonal turns the whole TV into two triangles, like this. So you know that one side is 12 inches long, and the other is 16 inches long. So when you want to find the actual length of your TV, you would want to find x in this case. Okay, so this problem may seem a little bit harder because of the larger numbers. Well, first, you want to start off with the same equation we had from the beginning. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Then, what do you have to do next? Well, you should know that the next step is filling in what we know. So it becomes 12 squared plus 16 squared equals c squared. So, what is the square root of 12? What is the answer of 12 squared? You don't know? Well, it's basic. What is 12 times 12? Well, 12 times 12 is 144. But what is the square root of 16? It's 16 times 16, which means that it's 256. So the new equation becomes 144 plus 256 equals c squared. The next step is adding. So what is 144 plus 256? Well, it becomes 400 equals c squared. So, what is the square root of 400? You don't know? Well, the square root of 400 then becomes 20. So 20 equals c. Okay, so now that we found the answer, which is 20 equals c, or x in this case, we want to go back to our original problem. So, this was our original. So, since x was unknown, we have now solved it, which is now qualified as c. So, that becomes now 20 inches. So that means that the actual length is 20 inches. However, what if the advertised length was 22 inches? What does that mean? Does that make the actual length smaller or larger than the advertised length? Explain. Okay, so the advertised length is 22 inches. However, the actual length is 20 inches. What does that mean? Well, what does 22 mean to 20? Well, that means that 22 is larger than 20. So, to explain that, we would say the advertised length is larger than the actual length of your TV. So, the advertised length was incorrect. Therefore, you had actually found the correct dimensions of your new TV. Enjoy! Okay, so now it's time for you to accomplish your own independent word problem. So let's say you have a tree. You know that its height is about 30 feet tall. It casts a shadow from the top of the tree for about the measurement of 40 feet. You want to know what the length or distance is from the top of the tree to the end of the shadow. This will be known as C. What steps will you take to find out the missing length or distance of C? Pause this video so you can solve it on your own. Then unpause when you are ready to listen and watch your explanation. Okay, So are you ready to listen to your explanation? So we know that our equation must be a squared plus b squared equals c squared. We don't know the length or distance of c, so that means we only know a and b, which are 30 feet and 40 feet. So 30 squared plus 40 squared equals c squared. However, you can simplify the lengths of 30 and 40 feet to make them easier numbers to work with. So 30 and 40 can both be divisible by 10. So then that means that they both equal 3 and 4. Aren't those simpler numbers? So let's go back. So now we can simplify to 3 squared plus 4 squared equals c squared. This is very simple because now 3 squared becomes 9 and 4 squared becomes 16. So that means that 9 plus 6 is 25, which means 25 is c squared. So the square root of 25 means that it's 5. But we're not done there. We know that 30 and 40 were divided by 10 to become 3 and 4, which are single-digit numbers. So since 5 is single-digit, just like 3 and 4, 5 can be multiplied by 10 to then become 50, or 50 feet. So it becomes now double-digit like the original numbers, 30 and 40. So let's go back to our original problem. That means that c is not unknown. So let's erase that c. So now that we've solved for c, it means that c is now 50 feet. So that means that from the top of the tree to the end of the shadow means that it's 50 feet long. And you've solved your first independent word problem. Okay, for another guided example, let's use a real-life situation. Say you're on a trip from New Jersey to South Dakota. From South Dakota, you want to go to the Gulf of Mexico. Then you want to finish that trip and go back home. This happens to form a right triangle. You know that the distance from New Jersey to South Dakota is about 4,000 miles. You know that the distance from South Dakota to the Gulf of Mexico is approximately 3,000 miles. However, the distance between the Gulf of Mexico and New Jersey is unknown. Let's try and solve this. This can be represented with the model of Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now, to fill in all of the variables, we must go back to the original problem. Okay, so you know that two lengths are 4,000 and 3,000 miles. So let's write this out. So since we know that two lengths are 4,000 and 3,000 miles. However, you can easily simplify this by dividing by 1,000, so they both become 4 and 3, so they're easier numbers to work with. So now we must fill it into our equation, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So now it becomes 4 squared plus 3 squared equals c squared. Now, as we've done before, now it becomes 16 plus 9 equals c squared, and adds up to 25 equals c squared. Square root of 25 then becomes 5. However, we don't stop there. So, we know that the original lengths were 4,000 and 3,000 miles. However, we divided them by 1,000 to get 4 and 3, which are single-digit numbers. However, since our answer, 5, was also single-digit, we now know that we must multiply by 1,000 to get our new answer, which then becomes 5,000 miles. So, as we go back to our original problem, we now know that the unknown length from the Gulf of Mexico to New Jersey is 5,000 miles.
Pythagorean triples can save you a ton of work and come in handy during the NJ Ask.
So what are Pythagorean triples?
Well, if you must know, Pythagorean triples are a set of three positive numbers that fit the rule a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Suppose you have a question like this on the NJ Ask. This seems a little bit hard to do, doesn't it? With a calculator, sure, it's easy, but what if a question like this was on a non-calculator section? This would take up most of your time. This is where Pythagorean triples come into play. There are many more Pythagorean triples, but these are the ones that show up the most. You might want to write these down. It may be of help when you're doing your assessment.
The cool thing about Pythagorean triples is if, let's say you start with a 3, 4, 5 triangle, you can multiply each side by 4 and ultimately get a 16, 12, 20 triangle.
So suppose you have a question like this and you need to find b. The first thing you would do is find the GCF of 20 and 12, which is 4. So then you would divide 20 and 12 by 4. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. And 20 divided by 4 is 5. And then you realize it's a 3, 4, 5 triangle. So the first thing so after that you would multiply 4 times 4 because the GCF is 4. And you get 16, so B is 16. So suppose you have a question like this and you need to find B. The first thing you would do is find the GCF of 20 and 12, which is 4. So then you would divide 20 and 12 by 4. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. And 20 divided by 4 is 5. And then you realize it's a 3, 4, 5 triangle. So the first thing so after that you would multiply 4 times 4 because the GCF is 4. And you get 16, so B is 16. So suppose you have a question like this. How would you find B? The first thing you would do is find the GCF of 156 and 144. Then you would divide the two numbers by the GCF. After doing so, you would realize that it's a Pythagorean triple, which makes life a whole lot easier. Then you would multiply this side by the GCF. Okay, let's put what you learned to the test. Try finding A all by yourself. Don't forget to pause it. A equals 24. If you're confused, please look at the work.
Bye-bye!